suppose we have a new theory, some version of modified gravity, and we already know that what that is quite likely to do is already solve one of the fundamental questions, namely, that's bothering everyone in physics, namely the smallness of the cosmological constant, perhaps, okay?
Right.
And it could lead to many other conclusions too.
Right.
So how would one cope with these completely new physics directions?
If I understand your question, what you're doing is, I mean, people have suggested things like this, right? I mean, they've suggested other theories of gravity. For instance, in trying to deal with, you know, the dark matter hypothesis, idea and this sort of thing, modified Newtonian gravity. But I think the thing is that once you get the hypothesis, you have to then search scientifically for indications that there would be certain consequences to that you would then go out and look for those. If that were true, then there would be a certain number of things that should also be true, and you'd sort of see if those were true. For instance, I think a good example for me, and something that I've written a little bit on with George Ellis, is the use of retroduction. He disagrees with me on this, but the use of retroduction in supporting multi-universe theories, or the theory of the multi-universe. He says, well, you can't do it scientifically. I would say, well, from a retroductive point of view, yes, you could, because if you use a multiverse theory and it turns out that the multiverse theory is an essential theory in the long term, we don't know whether it is or not, that explains a lot, explains everything about our observable universe in a much better way than anything else, then you would say that long-term success of a particular multi-universe theory would in some sense be, via retroduction, scientific evidence for a multiverse. Right?
I think you have to then address the other question, which is there is quite possibly no way of any scientific test of that, so I don't see how it could ever be a scientific verification.
Well, that's true, but there's no direct way, but I think retroduction points to indirect ways. I mean, in the sense that, yeah, we will almost certainly never detect another universe. But for instance, if Sean can correct me, but it seems to me that a number of the proposals for the formation of our Big Bang from a quantum cosmological point of view, when you actually investigate them, it's very hard in them to avoid the production of other universes in the same process, right? So, and so I think that if that's true, that would be an example of where the best theory for how our universe began automatically involves the fact that there were lots of other universes that must have been produced in that. But we would never detect them. It's just that it's the best theory that we have.
I'm afraid the word best is very much in the eye of the creator of that particular theory or set of theories.
Well, or of the scientific community.
Right.
Right. I mean, I think the scientific community would eventually have to, for long-term success, the scientific community would basically have to agree on that. And I think we're a long way from establishing scientific success for a multi-universe theory.
I took the principle of sufficient reason discussion at the beginning to be saying that there are some fundamental questions about why there is a universe to core, so to speak, that can't be answered, and that's why you posit.
That might not have an answer.
That might not, exactly, right, okay, that might not have an, right, so this is where I wanted to get them in dialogue. So what would you say to the claim that there just isn't an answer? So what you said at the end of your talk was two things. You said that it's a meaningful question to ask whether there are explanations in this sense. And you also said that there's an arbitrariness about stopping explanation at this point.
Right. Yeah, stopping stopping inquiry. Whether you can get
Right.
explanation is another question.
Right. So it seems that the meaningfulness doesn't seem misses the force of the objection, because it can be meaningful to ask for something even if that thing is not there. I can ask you to produce a griffin, and that's meaningful even if you cannot produce a griffin, because there is no griffin.
Right.
And I imagine that Sean would push that sort of line against the meaningful case.
Right.
So I was wondering if you could talk to how you would address that style of point.
Well, then, yeah, I see the point, and that may be the case. But the problem is that there's this other issue of what seems to be the conditioned character of everything, the conditioned character of the universe. That it doesn't seem to be self-explanatory or self-sufficient. And I suppose the thing is that I would then ask Sean or whoever was making the objection, well, show me how you get around. Is that an illusion? The lack of.
So what is conditioned character?
Well, it means that it needs something else. It needs something else to from which it flows. In other words, it's not something whose existence is explained. And why? I mean, I think that's the key thing. I mean, it's in other words, it's a little bit like what Stephen Hawking says in the very end of his A Brief History of Time, in the last page or two, where he says that one of the questions, at least when he was writing then or thinking then, what makes there to be a universe that the equations can describe, right? And that is the question of existence. There are lots of other possibilities that could have existed, but we don't find. And so, and that, I mean, for instance, if you have a pre-Big Bang theory, or you have an inflaton, a scalar potential, which leads to inflation, or a vacuum, well, that inflaton has some existence. I mean, you need that sort of thing to get the universe, right? So the universe that comes from it is conditioned, but the inflaton and the laws of physics that describe the behavior of the inflaton themselves are conditioned, in the sense that why that inflaton? Why do you have the fine-tuning of something like that that's fine-tuned to give this, right? I mean, those are all things. So you can. So that's the question. But maybe it's a bad question. But the reason then I'd want to know, well, why is the question bad? And I hope that during the rest of the meeting, at some point we can, I mean, the questions are very difficult, and sometimes the questions really need conceptual clarification, not just answering them, but what are we talking about when we raise these questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, let's thank our speakers.